The gunshot echoed across the Montana Territory plains, sending a flock of startled birds into the vast blue sky of 1876. Adam Rutherford stood over the fresh grave, his 4 children huddled against him like scared rabbits, their faces streaked with tears they were too exhausted to shed anymore. Their mother Sarah's final resting place was marked by nothing more than a wooden cross bearing her name and the dates that encompassed her too short life. "Pa, is Mama with the angels now?" 6-year-old Emma asked, her small hand clutching his calloused fingers. Adam swallowed hard against the knot in his throat. "Yes, sweetheart, she's watching over us." 10-year-old James, the oldest, stood straight-backed, trying to be the man his father needed. 8-year-old Thomas stared vacantly at the disturbed earth, while 4-year-old Lily simply clung to Adam's leg, too young to fully comprehend the finality of death, but old enough to feel the crushing weight of absence. The journey back to their homestead was silent save for the creak of wagon wheels and occasional sob from one of the children. Adam's mind raced with thoughts that threatened to drown him. How could he raise 4 children alone? How could he run the farm, cook, clean, and be both mother and father to these innocent souls who deserved so much more than a broken-hearted man stumbling through grief? Sarah had been his everything, his North Star, his reason for leaving Philadelphia 5 years ago to seek a better life in the untamed West. Now she was gone, taken by the fever that had swept through the territory like a vengeful ghost. As their small cabin came into view, Adam felt the full weight of responsibility descend upon his shoulders. The crops needed tending, the livestock required care, meals had to be prepared, and most importantly, 4 young hearts needed mending, including his own. "James, help your brother and sisters inside," Adam instructed as he brought the wagon to a halt. "I'll be in shortly to start supper." The boy nodded solemnly, taking his role seriously as he herded his siblings toward the cabin. Adam remained seated for a moment, allowing himself one brief instant of weakness where no small eyes could witness his tears. "Lord, give me strength," he whispered, before wiping his face with a handkerchief and climbing down from the wagon. That night, after serving a meager meal of beans and cornbread that none of them had the appetite to finish, Adam tucked each child into bed. He read from Sarah's Bible by lantern light, his voice catching on the passages that had been her favorites. When he finally retired to his own bed, the emptiness beside him felt infinite. Morning came too soon, announcing itself with insistent rooster crows. Adam rose before dawn, as was his habit, but found James already dressed and waiting by the stove. "I can help, Pa," the boy said. "Ma showed me how to make the coffee." Adam's heart broke anew at his son's determination. "Thank you, son. That would be a great help." Thus began their new reality days filled with endless work and nights haunted by exhaustion and grief. Adam tried his best to maintain routines, to provide stability amid their shattered world. He learned through trial and error how to braid Lily's hair, though it never looked as neat as when Sarah had done it. He burned more meals than he cared to count before mastering basic cooking skills. He stayed up late mending torn clothes with clumsy stitches that would have made Sarah laugh gently before showing him a better way. The children adapted as children do, finding their places in this new order. James became Adam's right hand, taking on chores beyond his years. Thomas withdrew into himself, finding solace in caring for the farm animals. Emma appointed herself little mother to Lily, brushing her hair and helping her dress each morning. And Lily's sweet Lily, who resembled Sarah the most, became the unexpected emotional anchor, her innocent questions and observations often pulling Adam back from the brink of despair. Weeks turned into months. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's chill. The harvesting kept them busy from sunup to sundown, leaving little time for grief during daylight hours. Adam's hands grew more calloused, his face more weathered, his shoulders permanently bent forward as if carrying an invisible burden. The neighboring homesteaders did what they could. The Hendersons brought over stew and fresh bread when they could spare it. Old Mr. Collins helped with the heavier farm work when his arthritis permitted, and Mrs. Wilson from town occasionally took the girls for an afternoon to give them female companionship. But these kindnesses were sporadic in a land where everyone's survival depended on their own labor. On a crisp October afternoon, as Adam was splitting wood for the coming winter, the sound of an approaching wagon drew his attention. Visitors were rare enough to be noteworthy, and he wasn't expecting anyone. He set down his axe and wiped the sweat from his brow as the wagon came into view. A woman he didn't recognize held the reins, guiding a pair of chestnut horses toward the cabin. She was alone, which was unusual for these parts where unaccompanied women seldom traveled the dangerous roads. Adam approached cautiously, hand instinctively moving to the rifle that was never far from reach. "Can I help you, madam?" The woman brought the wagon to a halt and regarded him with clear, intelligent eyes. "Mr. Rutherford, I'm Violet Lawson. I've come from Riverspend." Riverspend was the nearest town, a good 15 miles east. Adam had been there only twice since Sarah's passing, unable to spare the time for the journey. "What brings you all this way, Miss Lawson?" he asked, noting she wore no wedding ring. "Mrs. Wilson asked me to check on you and the children." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I'm the new schoolteacher in town. Mrs. Wilson thought perhaps your older ones might benefit from some lessons, and she hesitated. She mentioned you might need some additional help." Pride flared in Adam's chest. He opened his mouth to refuse, to declare that they were managing just fine, "Thank you very much." But at that moment, Lily came running from the chicken coop, her dress covered in dirt and what appeared to be egg yolk, her hair a wild tangle that hadn't seen a proper combing in days. Pa, the mean chicken pecked me again," she cried, only noticing the stranger after she'd latched onto Adam's leg. Violet Lawson's expression softened as she looked at the little girl. She climbed down from the wagon with graceful ease, her simple blue dress settling around practical boots. "Hello there," she said, crouching to Lily's level. "What's your name?" Lily hid partially behind Adam's leg, suddenly shy. "Lily," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name for a beautiful girl," Violet replied. "I'm Miss Lawson." "Would you like me to show you how to collect eggs without getting pecked?" Lily's eyes widened with interest, and she nodded. Adam watched, somewhat stunned, as this stranger gently took his daughter's hand and led her toward the chicken coop, already explaining in a soothing voice about approaching chickens from the side and moving slowly. By supper time, Miss Lawson had not only taught Lily about egg collecting, but had also helped Emma prepare a proper meal, the first truly palatable one in months, shown Thomas a gentle way to bridle the more stubborn mule, and discussed mathematics with James at a level Adam couldn't hope to match. The cabin was tidier than it had been since Sarah's passing, and all 4 children seemed lighter somehow, as if a bit of the grief that had shrouded them had momentarily lifted. As they sat around the table eating stew that actually had seasoning beyond salt, Adam found himself studying Violet Lawson. She wasn't conventionally beautiful like Sarah had been, with her golden hair and delicate features. Violet was tall and sturdy, with practical hands that moved with purpose and efficiency. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, though a few strands had escaped to frame a face more handsome than pretty, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and Adam estimated her to be in her late 20s, old enough to have experienced life, but young enough to handle its hardships with resilience. "Mr. Rutherford," she said, interrupting his thoughts, "I'd be willing to come by twice a week to provide lessons for the children. They're bright and eager to learn." Adam hesitated. "That's very kind, but we can't afford to pay a teacher's wages. The harvest was smaller than hoped this year." "I'm not asking for payment," she replied matter-of-factly. "Education shouldn't be a luxury afforded only to those with means. Besides, I have Wednesdays and Saturdays free from my town duties." "We don't accept charity, Miss Lawson," Adam said stiffly. Violet met his gaze directly. "It's not charity to help neighbors, Mr. Rutherford. It's what builds communities in places like this. Without it, none of us would survive." Her words struck him with unexpected force. Hadn't he accepted help from the Hendersons, from Mr. Collins? Why was this different? "Perhaps," she continued when he didn't respond, "you could contribute some of your farm produce to the school lunch program in exchange. Many of my students come from families who can't provide adequate meals. It was a graceful solution that preserved his pride while meeting a genuine need. Adam found himself nodding. That seems fair. And so began a new chapter for the Rutherford family. Twice weekly, Miss Lawson arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, her wagon loaded with books, slates, and occasionally small treats for the children. She transformed their kitchen table into a classroom, teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and history with a passion that made even Thomas emerge from his shell of silence. But her presence brought more than education. With subtle suggestions rather than criticism, she taught Adam better ways to manage the household. She showed him how to preserve vegetables for winter, how to remove stains from clothing, how to braid Lily's hair properly. Each lesson came without judgment, presented as shared knowledge rather than correction. The children blossomed under her attention. James's quick mind devoured the advanced books she brought specifically for him. Thomas discovered a talent for drawing that she nurtured with precious paper and pencils. Emma learned to sew properly, no longer needing to hide her crooked stitches. And Lily, who had barely spoken in the months after her mother's death, now chattered constantly, trailing after Miss Violet like a devoted shadow. Adam found himself watching the clock on Wednesdays and Saturdays, anticipating her arrival with an eagerness that both confused and unsettled him. He told himself it was relief at the temporary lightening of his burden, nothing more. Yet he couldn't deny that the cabin felt emptier when she left, or that he found himself wondering what she might think of various decisions he made throughout the week. Winter arrived with brutal force that December, bringing howling blizzards that confined them to the cabin for days at a time. Adam worried about Miss Lawson attempting the journey from town in such conditions. But on the first Wednesday after the snow began, she arrived bundled in a heavy coat and scarf, her cheeks rosy from the cold but her eyes bright with determination. "You shouldn't have risked it," Adam scolded as he helped her down from the wagon. "The trails are treacherous." "These children's education won't wait for fair weather, Mr. Rutherford," she replied with a smile that somehow warmed him despite the biting wind. "Besides, I brought provisions from town. There's concern about families in outlying homesteads being cut off by the snow." That night, the storm intensified. Wind howled around the cabin like a living thing, finding every crack and crevice to send icy drafts skittering across the floor. By evening, it was clear that returning to town would be impossible. "You'll have to stay the night, Miss Lawson," Adam said, feeling strangely awkward. "I can make up a bed for you with the girls." "Thank you," she replied simply, as if the arrangement was the most natural thing in the world. That night, with all 4 children and Miss Lawson asleep in the cabin's single bedroom, Adam lay awake on his makeshift pallet near the fireplace, listening to the storm and feeling oddly at peace despite the chaos outside. There was something profoundly right about having her there, as if a missing piece had slid into place. The thought startled him, and he pushed it away. Sarah had been gone barely 8 months. His grief was still raw, still bleeding at unexpected moments. There was no room in his heart for such thoughts about another woman, especially one as independent and educated as Violet Lawson, who surely had better prospects than a widowed farmer with 4 children. The blizzard raged for 3 days. During that time, "Miss Lawson, please call me Violet, Mr. Rutherford. Formality seems silly when we're snowed in together," became truly integrated into their family rhythm. She told stories by firelight, taught the children songs and simple dances to keep them entertained, and shared the cooking and cleaning as if she'd always been part of the household. On the 3rd evening, after the children had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from a day of indoor games and lessons, Adam found himself alone with Violet by the fire. She was darning one of James's socks, her nimble fingers working the needle with practiced ease. "You're very good with them," he said quietly. "The children, I mean," she smiled without looking up from her work. "They make it easy. They're wonderful children, Adam." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something in her voice when she said it made his heart beat faster. "Sarah would be pleased," he continued, needing to acknowledge his late wife's presence between them. "She worried about them constantly, even before she got sick, worried they wouldn't get proper schooling out here, that they'd grow up wild without refinement. Violet's hands stilled. "Tell me about her," she said softly, "if you don't mind." No one had asked him that since the funeral. Everyone in the area had known Sarah, or thought they did. But they hadn't known her, as he had the woman who read poetry by candlelight, who had insisted on bringing her mother's fine china all the way from Philadelphia, despite the risk of breakage, who had faced every hardship of frontier life with a determination that belied her delicate appearance. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush, as if a dam had broken. He told Violet about meeting Sarah at a Philadelphia social, about her family's opposition to her marrying a man with dreams of westward expansion, about her courage during that first brutal winter when they'd nearly starved. He spoke of her gentleness with the children, her unexpected strength during childbirth, her unwavering faith that had sustained them through countless hardships. "She sounds remarkable," Violet said when he finally fell silent. "No wonder you loved her so." "I did," Adam replied, surprised to find that speaking of Sarah brought more comfort than pain. "I always will." "Of course you will," Violet said with such understanding that he had to look away, afraid of what his face might reveal. "Love doesn't end because someone is gone, Adam. It just changes form." The next morning, the storm broke. Sunlight sparkled blindingly off the pristine snow, and the world seemed renewed, cleansed of its imperfections beneath the white blanket. Adam helped Violet prepare her wagon for the journey back to town, loading it with vegetables from their root cellar, as promised for the school lunch program. As he worked, he found himself searching for words to express what her presence had meant to them during the storm, how much lighter the burden of grief felt after sharing it with her. "We'll see you on Saturday," he asked instead, suddenly fearful that the intimacy of their conversation might have made her uncomfortable. "Of course," she replied, adjusting her scarf against the cold. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." Something in her voice made him look up sharply, but her face revealed nothing beyond friendly warmth as she climbed onto the wagon seat. He watched her drive away until the wagon was nothing but a dark speck against the snow, then turned back to the cabin where 4 pairs of eyes watched from the window, already counting the days until Saturday. The winter months passed in a rhythm of struggle and small joys. Adam worked tirelessly to keep the family fed and warm, chopping endless cords of wood, hunting when supplies ran low, repairing equipment by firelight after the children were asleep. Violet's visits became the bright spots around which the rest of their lives revolved, not just for the children but for Adam as well, though he was careful not to examine that feeling too closely. He noticed small changes in himself. He began taking more care with his appearance on the days she was expected, trimming his beard neatly and ensuring his clothes were as clean as frontier life allowed. He found himself saving observations or questions throughout the week, mental notes of things to discuss with her. Most startling of all, he caught himself actually laughing at her witty observations and the children's antics, a sound he'd thought forever silenced by grief. Spring's arrival brought new challenges. The melting snow turned the trails to mud, making travel difficult. Planting season demanded every moment of daylight. Still, Violet came faithfully, sometimes arriving mud-splattered and exhausted, but always with a smile and fresh ideas for the children's education. One Wednesday in late April, she arrived later than usual, looking troubled. The children were so excited to see her that they didn't notice, but Adam detected the tension in her shoulders and the forced brightness of her smile. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly while the children set up their lessons. Violet hesitated, then sighed. "The school board met yesterday. There's been some concern about my frequent absences from town." Adam felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Because you're coming here," she nodded. "Some feel my primary obligation is to the children who attend the schoolhouse proper, and others." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Some find it improper for an unmarried woman to spend so much time with a widower." The implication struck him like a physical blow. "That's ridiculous. You're teaching the children, nothing more." Even as he said it, Adam knew it wasn't entirely true. Though nothing improper had occurred between them, the connection they'd formed went beyond teacher and parent. The way his heart lifted at the sight of her, the way conversation flowed between them, the way she seemed to understand his thoughts before he expressed them, these things couldn't be dismissed as merely friendly. Nevertheless, Violet continued, I've been instructed to limit my visits to once monthly or risk losing my position. The children's disappointed cries when they heard the news nearly broke Adam's heart. James argued logically about their right to education, Thomas withdrew into sullen silence, Emma cried openly, and Lily attached herself to Violet's skirts, refusing to let go. Perhaps, Adam suggested desperately, we could bring the children to town for lessons. I could manage it once a week. Violet shook her head. The school is already overcrowded, and the journey would be too much, especially for Lily. That evening, after Violet had left with promises to find a solution, Adam sat on the porch steps watching the sunset. The beauty of the golden light spreading across his fields brought no comfort. He had come to rely on Violet's presence, her guidance, her companionship. The thought of seeing her only once a month felt like losing Sarah all over again, a comparison that both startled and shamed him. For weeks, they tried to adjust to the new arrangement. Violet sent books and lessons with travelers heading in their direction. Adam worked with the children every evening after chores, doing his best to follow her curriculum. But he could see them regressing not just in their studies, but in their spirits. The light that had returned to their eyes under Violet's care was dimming again. As for himself, Adam found the loneliness almost unbearable. He hadn't realized how much he had come to depend on their conversations, her gentle humor, her unwavering support. Without her, the doubts and fears he'd been holding at bay came rushing back. Was he failing these children? Would Sarah be disappointed in his efforts? How could he possibly be both father and mother to 4 young souls who deserved so much more on a sweltering June afternoon? As Adam struggled to repair the plow while supervising the children's weeding of the vegetable garden, the sound of an approaching wagon made them all look up hopefully. Violet wasn't due for another 2 weeks, but perhaps she'd found a way to visit early. Instead, it was Mrs. Wilson from town, her normally cheerful face somber as she pulled her wagon to a stop. Mr. Rutherford, she greeted him with a nod. Children, I've come with news. Adam's heart clenched with dread. In his experience, unexpected news was rarely good. What is it? He asked, wiping his hands on a rag as he approached the wagon. It's Miss Lawson, Mrs. Wilson said, her voice heavy. She's resigned her position and left town. The world seemed to tilt beneath Adam's feet. Left? Where? Why? Mrs. Wilson shook her head. She didn't say where she was going, just packed her things and was gone this morning, but as to why. The older woman fixed him with a meaningful look. The school board was making her life difficult. There was talk about her character, about her visits here. You know how people gossip. Adam felt sick with guilt and anger. Violet had lost her position, her livelihood, because of her kindness to his family, because of him. Did she leave any message? He asked, hating the desperation in his voice. Not with me, Mrs. Wilson replied, but she did leave this. She reached into her bag and withdrew a package wrapped in brown paper. For the children, she said. Inside were 4 books, each carefully chosen for its recipient. An advanced mathematics text for James, a sketchbook and colored pencils for Thomas, a collection of poetry for Emma, and a beautifully illustrated fairy tale book for Lily. A note in Violet's elegant handwriting reads simply, Education is a light that no darkness can extinguish. Keep learning, keep growing. With love, VL. There was nothing for Adam, no personal goodbye, no explanation, no hint of where she might have gone. The absence felt deliberate, a clear message that whatever connection he thought they'd shared had been one-sided. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Lily only succumbing after exhausting herself with tears, Adam sat alone by the dying fire, turning Violet's note over and over in his hands. The words with love jumped out at him, simultaneously warming his heart and twisting it with regret for things unsaid, chances not taken. For 3 days, Adam moved through his chores like a man sleepwalking. The children were subdued, going about their tasks without their usual chatter. Even the farm seemed to reflect their mood, with clouds gathering ominously on the horizon and a heavy stillness in the air that spoke of approaching storms. On the fourth day, as Adam was repairing fencing in the far field, James came running across the pasture, waving frantically. "Pa, Pa." "There's a wagon coming." Adam squinted against the sun, making out a distant vehicle approaching on the main trail. Hope flared painfully in his chest, but he tamped it down. It was probably just a passing traveler, or perhaps the Hendersons coming to trade. Yet as the wagon drew closer, he recognized the team of chestnut horses. His hammer fell from suddenly nerveless fingers as he began walking, then running toward the cabin. Violet was climbing down from the wagon when he reached the yard, surrounded by the children who danced around her like excited puppies. She looked different somehow. Her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual practical bun, and she wore a dress he'd never seen before, a soft green that matched the new leaves on the cottonwood trees. "Miss Lawson," he said, suddenly formal in his shock. "We heard you'd left town." "I did," she replied, her eyes searching his face. "I went to Helena to speak with the territorial superintendent of schools." This was not what Adam had expected. The superintendent, Violet nodded, a hint of triumph in her smile. "I proposed a new program for reaching children in remote homesteads, traveling teachers who would rotate between settlements too small for their own schools." She took a deep breath. "He approved it. I'll be the first such teacher responsible for this region. So you'll still be able to teach us?" Emma asked excitedly. "Yes," Violet confirmed. "In fact, I'll be coming more often, not less. And there will be no more nonsense from the local school board, as I'll be reporting directly to the territorial office." The children erupted in cheers, but Adam noticed that Violet's eyes never left his face, as if gauging his reaction. There was something more she wasn't saying, he could feel it. "Children," he said, making a quick decision, "why don't you show Miss Lawson how well you've kept up with your studies? Your books are on the kitchen table." They ran inside, leaving Adam and Violet alone in the yard. For a moment, neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken words. "You didn't just go to Helena for a teaching position," Adam said finally, taking a step closer to her. Violet met his gaze steadily. "No, I needed to make arrangements that would allow me to continue teaching while also." She hesitated, then continued more softly, while also following my heart. Adam's own heart was pounding so loudly he was sure she must hear it. "And where is your heart leading you, Violet?" "Here," she said simply. "To this farm, to those children." She paused, her courage seeming to falter for the first time since he'd known her. "To you, if you'll have me." The world around them seemed to still, the very air holding its breath as Adam struggled to find words. I don't have much to offer a woman like you," he said finally. "This life is hard." The children are a blessing, not a burden," Violet interrupted. "And as for what you have to offer," her voice softened. "Adam, you offer the most honest heart I've ever known. You offer strength without cruelty, tenderness without weakness. You've held this family together through the worst pain imaginable." She took a step closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I'm not asking you to stop loving Sarah. I would never ask that. I'm just asking if there might be room in your heart for new love alongside the old." Adam had imagined this moment in the darkest hours of night, in fleeting daydreams while working the fields, in the quiet moments when Violet's laugh had warmed their cabin. But the reality of her standing before him, offering her heart so openly, left him momentarily speechless. "I don't know if I remember how," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "To love like that again." Violet smiled, a tender expression that reached her eyes. "Then we'll learn together." She reached out, her hand hovering just shy of touching his cheek. "All I know is that when I'm with you and the children, I feel like I'm home. And when I'm away, I count the hours until I can return." Adam closed the distance between them, capturing her hand and pressing it to his cheek. Her palm was warm against his skin, a simple touch that somehow felt more intimate than any he could remember. "Stay," he whispered. "Not just today, stay for good." "Are you asking me to marry you, Adam Rutherford?" Violet asked, a teasing light in her eyes despite the seriousness of the moment. "I believe I am," he replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Though I always imagined I'd do it properly, with a ring, and Violet silenced him by rising on her tiptoes and pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, almost chaste, yet it sent warmth cascading through him like a summer rain after drought. "Yes," she said as she pulled away, her eyes shining. "Yes, I will marry you." A chorus of cheers erupted from the cabin porch, where 4 faces peered around the doorframe with varying expressions of delight and mischief. "Were you all eavesdropping?" Adam demanded, though he couldn't summon any real indignation. "We were conducting an educational observation of adult courtship rituals," James replied with a straight face, using the formal vocabulary Violet had been teaching him. "That means spying," Thomas translated with a rare grin. "Is Miss Violet going to be our new mama?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. Adam looked to Violet, suddenly concerned the question might overwhelm her, but she was already moving toward the porch, gathering Lily into her arms. "If that would be all right with you," she said seriously. "I could never replace your real mama, who loved you very much, but I would be honored to be your second mama, who loves you just as truly in her own way." Lily considered this with the solemnity only a 5-year-old could muster. "I think Mama would say it's okay," she decided. "She told me angels pick special people to look after the ones they love. I think she picked you." Adam felt tears prick his eyes at his youngest daughter's words. The theological accuracy might be questionable, but the sentiment resonated with truth. If Sarah could have chosen someone to mother her children in her absence, someone like Violet, strong, kind, intelligent, would have been her choice. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through. The entire community turned out, even those who had gossiped about Violet's visits. Mrs. Wilson served as matron of honor, beaming with satisfaction at the match she had indirectly facilitated. Mr. Collins played fiddle for the dancing afterward, his arthritic fingers nimble enough for this special occasion. Violet wore a dress of deep blue that she had sewn herself, with Emma's help. Each of the children had a special role. James gave the bride away, Thomas carried the rings, Emma scattered wildflowers along the path, and Lily held the small Bible upon which they placed their hands for the vows. "I never thought I would find love again," Adam said that night, when they were finally alone in the cabin's bedroom. The children were spending the night at the Hendersons' farm, giving the newlyweds a precious night of privacy. "After Sarah died, it felt like that part of me died too." Violet sat beside him on the edge of the bed, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face soft in the lantern light. "That's how grief works," she said. "It convinces us that joy is forever lost, but life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" "You certainly surprised me," Adam agreed, reaching out to touch a strand of her hair. A schoolteacher from back east with education and refinement, choosing a rough farmer with 4 children. "A brave man with a generous heart and 4 wonderful children," Violet corrected, leaning into his touch. "And I'm hardly refined. My father was a blacksmith, my mother a midwife. I worked my way through normal school by cleaning houses and minding children." This was new information. In all their conversations, Violet had shared little about her past. "Then how did you end up in Montana territory?" A shadow crossed her face. "I was engaged back in Ohio, to another teacher. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found him with," she paused, "with someone else." When the position in Riversbend was advertised, it seemed like fate, a fresh start in a place where no one knew my humiliation. Adam drew her closer, aching for the pain she must have felt. "His loss," he said simply, "our gain." She smiled up at him, vulnerability and strength mingling in her expression. "I never thought I'd trust a man with my heart again. Then I met a widower trying so desperately to be both father and mother to his children that he was wearing himself to nothing." Her hand came up to cup his cheek. "The first time I saw you, splitting wood with Lily clinging to your leg, James trying to help with logs too heavy for him, and you looking so exhausted but still smiling for them. I knew your heart was worth trusting." Adam turned his face to press a kiss into her palm. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both foreign and perfectly natural on his lips. Not instead of Sarah, but alongside that love, differently but no less truly. That's all I ask, Violet whispered, and then there were no more words needed as they discovered each other in the intimate language of touch and tender exploration. Summer flowed into autumn, and autumn into winter. The Rutherford farm flourished under the combined efforts of Adam and Violet, whose practical knowledge of agriculture surprised and impressed her husband. The children thrived with Violet's steady presence, her unwavering affection, and her commitment to their education. She continued her territorial teaching circuit, traveling to other homesteads 3 days a week, but always returning to the place and people who had become her heart's true home. One evening in early December, as snow fell gently outside the cabin windows, the family gathered around the fireplace. James read aloud from a new book Violet had brought from Helena, while Thomas sketched the scene in his ever-present drawing pad. Emma was helping Violet with a quilt, their heads bent together over careful stitches, while Lily dozed against Adam's shoulder, her small body warm and trusting. Adam watched them all, his heart so full it felt it might burst from his chest. The cabin that had once echoed with grief now rang with laughter. The burden that had threatened to crush him was now shared, made lighter by loving hands. The future that had once seemed bleak with obligation now shimmered with possibility. As if sensing his thoughts, Violet looked up and met his eyes across the room. The love in her gaze was so clear, so steady, that he had to catch his breath. "Pa," James said, interrupting his reading, "is something wrong? You look strange." Adam shook his head, smiling. "Nothing's wrong, son. Everything is very right." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Adam and Violet sat together by the dying fire, her head resting against his shoulder as they enjoyed a rare moment of peace. "I have something to tell you," Violet said softly, taking his hand and guiding it to rest against her stomach. "By next summer, there will be 5 children for you to raise, not 4. Adam froze, processing her words. We're going to have a baby," she nodded, watching his face anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" "I know we hadn't discussed," he silenced her with a kiss, pouring all his joy and wonder into the connection between them. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he whispered. Terrified, overwhelmed, ecstatic, those might come closer. Violet laughed softly, the sound that had become his favorite music. "That's how I feel too. Plus, the children will be overjoyed. Lily's been praying for a baby sister for months." "Has she now?" Adam raised an eyebrow. "And if it's a brother, she'll wrap him around her little finger, just like she has Thomas and James," Violet predicted with a smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance lower. Adam felt Violet's body gradually relax against his as sleepiness overtook her. "You should rest," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're carrying precious cargo." She nodded but made no move to rise. Instead, she turned her face up to his, her expression suddenly serious. "Adam, I want you to know something." "What is it, love?" "When I first came here, when I saw how hard you were working, how desperately you were trying to do everything alone." She paused, her hand finding his in the firelight. "I remember thinking that you needed someone to tell you it was all right to rest, to share the burden. You looked so tired, body and soul." Adam remembered those dark days, the exhaustion that had seeped into his very bones, the fear of failing his children, the guilt over not being enough. "You saved us," he said simply. "All of us." Violet shook her head. "No. You had already done the hardest part. You kept them safe, kept them loved, kept them together when grief could have shattered you all. All I did was remind you that you didn't have to do it alone." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines that had softened over the months of their marriage. "You've done enough, Adam. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders anymore. Rest now. Rest and let me help you build something beautiful from what remained." Adam gathered her close, burying his face in her hair to hide the sudden tears that sprang to his eyes. In her words, he heard an echo of Sarah, not a ghost from the past, but a blessing for the future. He had done enough. He had honored his first love by keeping their children safe until new love could find them. Now he could rest in the certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "I love you, Violet Rutherford," he whispered against her hair. with everything I am and everything I have left to become." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their small corner of the Montana territory in pristine white. Inside, the fire burned low but steady, much like the love that had found them when they least expected it, a love built on respect, understanding, and the courage to begin again. The following June, as wildflowers painted the prairie in a riot of colors, Violet gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Sarah. The delivery was difficult, but with Mrs. Wilson's experienced assistance and Adam's unwavering support, Violet emerged triumphant, if exhausted. "Two," Adam kept saying in wonder as he cradled his new son while Violet nursed Sarah. "Two perfect miracles. God has a sense of humor," Violet replied with tired amusement. "He knew we needed practice with 4 before he'd send us 2 more at once." The older children were besotted with their new siblings. James appointed himself official protector. Thomas spent hours sketching the sleeping infants. Emma helped with diaper changes and bathing. And Lily, initially disappointed that she had to share her long-awaited sister, quickly recovered when Violet assured her she was still the special big sister who would teach Sarah all the important things in life. As summer ripened into autumn, bringing with it the abundant harvest their combined efforts had produced, Adam often found himself pausing in his work to watch his expanded family. Sometimes he caught glimpses of Sarah, his first love, in the children's gestures or expressions, little reminders that she remained part of them, woven into the fabric of who they were becoming. One evening, as autumn's first chill touched the air, Adam found Violet on the porch after the children were asleep. She stood gazing at the stars, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her profile illuminated by the rising moon. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. She leaned back against his chest with a contented sigh. "How strange life's paths are. If you had told me 3 years ago that I would be here, a farmer's wife, mother to 6 children, teaching from a wagon across 3 counties, I would have thought you mad." "Regrets?" he asked, keeping his tone light though the question held weight. Violet turned in his arms to face him, her expression serious in the moonlight. "Not one," she said firmly. "This life we've built, it's richer, fuller, more meaningful than anything I could have imagined for myself." She glanced back toward the cabin where their children slept. "Those children in there, all of them, ours and Sarah's, they're the future of this territory, of this country. In them, I see possibilities I never dreamed of when I was teaching proper young ladies to recite poetry in Ohio." Adam felt a familiar swell of pride and gratitude. "You've given them wings and roots." "We both have," Violet corrected, reaching up to touch his face. "You were already giving them both when I arrived. You just needed someone to remind you that it's all right to rest sometimes, to share the load." "You've done far more than that," Adam said, drawing her closer. "You've taught me that life doesn't end with loss, that hearts can heal and grow and find new joy without betraying what came before." Violet smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Perhaps that's the most important lesson any of us can learn. That love isn't finite. It expands to fill the space we make for it." As if to emphasize her point, a baby's cry drifted from the cabin, little Sarah, whose lungs had proven remarkably powerful for such a tiny person. "I'll go," Adam said, pressing a kiss to Violet's forehead. "You've been with them all day. Rest now." She caught his hand as he turned to leave, her expression suddenly mischievous. "Don't be too long. I have plans for you once she settles." The promise in her voice sent warmth spreading through him. After more than a year of marriage, their passion for each other had only deepened, enriched by the intimacy of shared days and nights, joys and challenges. "Is that so, Mrs. Rutherford?" he asked, his voice dropping to a register that made her eyes darken. "Indeed it is, Mr. Rutherford," she replied with a playful dignity that dissolved into laughter when he pulled her close for a kiss that contained promises of its own. Later, as they lay tangled together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Violet's head pillowed on his chest and his arms holding her close, Adam reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the desolation of widowhood to the unexpected joy of new love. From the overwhelming burden of raising 4 children alone to the shared adventure of raising 6 together. From believing his heart capable of only grief to discovering its capacity for boundless love. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, not sure if Violet was still awake. "For what?" she murmured sleepily, her breath warm against his skin. "For finding us, for staying, for teaching me that rest isn't surrender." She pressed a kiss to his chest, directly over his heart. "Thank you for being worth finding, for making space for me in your children's lives, for showing me what real strength looks like." Outside, the Montana wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the first fallen leaves of autumn. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Adam and Violet Rutherford drifted towards sleep, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together rested, renewed, and deeply, abidingly loved. Years later, when asked the secret to their successful marriage and blended family, Violet would smile that particular smile that was reserved for Adam alone and say, "We learned that love isn't about holding on too tightly. It's about knowing when to carry the burden yourself and when to set it down and say, 'I've done enough for now. Let me rest while you take up the load.'" And Adam, his hair silvered but his eyes still bright with the love that had saved him, would add simply, "And knowing that there will always be hands ready to help when yours grow weary. That's not just love, that's family."